Boom. According to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Yuko Simon. Good to see you all. Let me just adjust the camera up. Maybe just a little bit there. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Now I've just suddenly realized it's tilted off at a funny angle. That's better. Anyway, good to see you all. And yes, indeed, boom time. Welcome to another Tokyo Tonight, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time every Sunday night. Good to see you all. And hey, let's do this and something happens. Come on, Mr. Cordychev, give me a break. So yeah, I see. Good to see we've already got 8 people watching. Good to see Tech Art 2, Quint Ranked, Steve from Berkeley, Bold Berlitz boy, excellent to see you. Steve from Berkeley, I think I already said. Quint Ranked, I think I already said. Good to see you. Anyway, if you're watching, please say hello. It's always nice to see who's there. And to say hello to people in different parts of the world. Big news, of course, being that I believe, was it this morning? In any case, it's been more or less safe to call now that Biden has the votes. So yeah, I get to go off my trying desperately not to talk to or watch news about Trump. So yeah, congrats on that. I'll talk a little bit tonight about what I think that means for Japan. And just my general thoughts on the state of the world that reflects. It's good on the American people for getting out and voting in record numbers. The fact that there were people campaigning on the basis of trying to suppress, like really suppress voting there is just kind of crazy. Hey, Emily Louise Maitland, excellent to see you. Good to have you there in the chat. And Sadiq, excellent to see you. Haven't seen you in the chat for ages, so good to have you here. So yeah, it's a really interesting result. And in a way, on the one hand, there's more relief than happiness from me. It's not like I don't know anyone who's a passionate Biden supporter. It's not like the excitement when Obama was elected, for example. In many ways, I mean, they've just elected an old white guy who's a career politician. So, it's many ways it's a return to the old normal, which, is what people were voting for Trump clearly to get away from, to try something else, which they got. I still think that there's a big danger that if the return back to normal is return back to the same problems without any realization that things sort of have to change a little bit, I'm worried that there could be another backlash years from now. And I don't have any expectations that, that Biden's some sort of Gandhi who's going to come back and just fix everything just because people are relieved at the change. So, I think it's good to enjoy that at least some form of sanity will return. But, it's still, I think we have to start criticizing. And I think we also actually, in the whole world, not just America. I'm not from America, but, it affects us as well. I think the world needs the Republicans to actually get their act back together and stop being a QAnon Tea Party fringe party and actually get back to normal, because otherwise, people might vote for the crazies again. And if there's no real alternative to the Democrats, and even if they're successful, I don't think that's healthy either. So, I actually think it's good to have 2 credible parties. They can be different, but they should try to be credible. And so, I think that'll be really interesting to see. So, if you're in the US, I know it's been kind of interesting, I suppose, probably more being there. It's been the worst thing about this whole thing, actually, the US election cycles are so long. They're like 18 months. It means that you only really get like 2.5 years of each president before they go into campaigning mode again. And it's really, the whole electoral process there is so painful. Most countries do this whole thing in like 2 months. By law, they restrict the time to 2 months, and they restrict the amount of money that can be spent. So I really, it kills us that this whole thing takes so long and draws out so much crazy. So, there's a lot of things I think American people should consider improving or looking at to make this whole thing easier for themselves and honestly for the rest of us. But yeah, interesting times ahead. So we'll talk about that tonight. We'll talk about the latest about the pandemic from Japan and various other news that I've been spotting. And as always, of course, if you do it, Quint Ranked there said, it's not over yet. Indeed, it's not over. Well, I expect the lawsuits from this are going to go on for ages, but it seems pretty clear that, one, I'm not buying any of the BS that there's like massive fraudulent fake voting going on, like is being suggested. I mean, there's always, the recounts and the hanging chads and whatnot, and we'll go through all of that like we did in 2000, and, it'll take time to get the final, unchallenged result, given that challenging is part of the strategy. I mean, this whole thing about how this whole thing was set up. So sure, it's not over, but given that the popular vote seems to have been won by a margin of more than 4 million, and it seems like the mail-in votes in particular have tipped it in multiple states. Like, it looks like it's not going to be a close thing actually in the end. It looks like Biden's going to end up with something like 295 electoral college votes. So it's not close in the popular or the electoral college, and I find it hard to think that there's a chance for the Republicans to flip it now. I mean, we'll let the challengers go ahead and we'll watch, but I think it's fair enough to call that it's won. And it's going to be an interesting time for America. Anyway, we will get into that. But as I was about to say, do what Quinn Rankin did at Mark Simon. If you would like to say something to me or ask me something to talk, or give me a topic to talk about, always happy to do that. If not, I'm just going to charge through the topics that we have. It's good to see more people rocking in. We've got THIS, excellent to see you. Thank you for being the first to thumbs up. And good reminder, actually, if you enjoy this content, it really does help. If you remember to thumbs up to like, so feel free to do that. And Subaru the car, excellent to see you once again. I love that handle. It's a great car. Car maker, brand, whatever. So yes, good to see you. And of course, everybody acknowledging whether you were happy or unhappy or whatever. It certainly isn't over. That's the whole idea. But yes. To Waiwai, am I talking Australia beating New Zealand at rugby? Much more fun than the US clusterfest, indeed. Well, only problem is that most other people wouldn't appreciate it. I am wearing the All Blacks training jersey tonight, but yes, New Zealand got properly beaten by Australia. And frankly, credit to Australia. I know, Tuwaiwa, you're a fan of the coach of Australia, who's a New Zealander. Good feature, actually. A lot of the players in the Australian team are from New Zealand. There's a few. Truth be told, Tuwaiwa, between you and me, that match in Wellington, we got out of jail with that match as a draw. We deserve to lose that game. Hey, Sergeant Bilko, excellent to see you. So, New Zealand, we just won a 4-match series against Australia with a draw, 2 wins, and a loss. The most recent game yesterday was a loss that Australia deservedly won by 2 points, and good on them. They really could have beaten us twice. It would have been super interesting, actually, if they had won that game. So, anyway, it's good for the All Blacks as well to lose. It kills me when we win every game and then we get to a World Cup every 4 years and everyone just studies all the tapes of us winning non-stop games. And then they beat us. It's the worst thing about being a New Zealand fan. So it's good for the team to lose. I really did like the fact that the team looked really hungry, especially when they won last week. So anyway, yes, indeed, I'll happily talk about New Zealand rugby if you want me to Waiwai, but and anyone else, I'll talk about if I can other stuff. I see more people rocking in. We've got Diggins, Contour, excellent to see you. Skeezy Squirrel, what's up? That's a good handle name. I like that. Hell, I should change for this channel name to that. That's a good handle. Good to have you, Skeezy Squirrel. Ahmed Usul, excellent to see you. 1 o'clock in the morning. The votes were coming in for Biden. This is absurd. Well, they weren't new votes. In fact, they were old votes. And the reason that they were coming in, that they were getting counted at 1 o'clock in the morning, is because those states where they were getting counted late actually changed the rules to count the mail-in votes after the, they normally they'll do the counts before the voting day, and they'd have all the totals and everything all done on the day. But it was actually part of the strategy to fight against mail-in votes, to actually change the timing of the counting to make it on or after the day, and that's why it's taken so long. And then they complain about the votes coming in later. It's just a pure strategy, so it's ridiculous. And I would advise, unless there is actual evidence of actual fake ballots actually being dropped in, which is just about unthinkable in America. It happens in a lot of countries, but I think it's unthinkable in America. We'll see. That's what the president is saying happened, and I'd love to see the proof of it. But no, this looks pretty tied up. So it all makes sense to me. Christopher Luke, excellent to see you. If Dems run to Canada, do reps go to Australia? Or UK? I mean, UK, if you talk about right-wing governments right now, I don't know, UK's giving Australia a good run for its money. But who knows where people run? I mean, don't run. Jeez, just participate. It's a total scam, Trump won out of it. Flat Earth has nothing to do with Trump. It's very, very nice. I mean, good entertainment there. Who else we got in here? We've got Andrea Morboy. Excellent to see you. Good morning from Australia. Of course, daylight saving. You're already in the morning there. So, yeah, good morning, Australia. Almost 1 a.m. Yes, indeed. Thank you for joining. Remember, you can, of course, watch it, recorded, and you can leave comments there as well. But it's always great to see people in here live. Can we talk about cricket instead of rugby? You could, although I'm not keeping up so well with cricket, other than New Zealand was doing pretty well at it a couple of years ago. But I'm out of touch. I used to play cricket, of course, but no, I couldn't really talk very much about it. Ahmed, all mail-in ballots came in for Trump. How can this be? Yes, behave, Ahmed, please. This is no. Let's try to. I try to make this a fake news hysteria zone as much as we can. Tokyo 503 saying hello to Andrea, and I'll say hello to you. And look at that, we've got people using butter emojis and not getting banned. So yeah, the algorithm, it's kind of spooky, isn't it? It seems to be learning. Maybe it can tell. I mean, if it can actually tell that there's been a lot of infuriating news about butter a particular week, and maybe it will actually censor the butter emoji. Maybe not. Who knows? But good to see you all. Good to see everybody rocking in. And yes, and Lucy, good. I'm very glad that you could join us. It's another handle name I don't recognize, which is always awesome. So very glad to have you here, Lucy. And as I was saying to everybody else, and Erin, good to see you. Erin, I was actually talking with JJ Walsh about rescheduling the upcoming stream with her, which will probably be on the 20th November, just for you, because you wanted us to go later. Unfortunately, for Joyce, it doesn't really work late at night, and which is what I would prefer. And for me, if it's not that, it's really got to be like earlier. So we might not be able to get it at a time that you want, but I just want you to let you know that we actually heard you, and we discussed, and we challenged, and we tried to figure something out. And it probably isn't going to be the time that you want, but we tried. So yeah, Lucy. Now we're getting butter. Okay, so if we're just getting pure butter. I don't know, it must have been margarine before. Yeah, they're getting banned, but hey, that's the algorithm. I'm not touching anything, people, but we've got, yes, pure butter. I see, because there was cheese beside it, it was okay. Maybe that's it. Maybe they could tell that if you post lots of butter, I will gradually get more aggravated. Lucy, as I was about to say, if you do what everybody else is doing at Mark Hiko Simon, you can say hello to me, you can ask me for a topic, you can ask me a question, or you can just point and laugh and call me names. You can do whatever gets you going. So please, good to see everybody doing that. This is this podcast. Now look at this. Steve from Berkeley. It was this podcast that led to the butter emoji being allowed. That message is held for review. I don't understand freedom. You guys, you're messing up the algorithm. Milk still works, so there we go. It's just butter right now is dairy products. Although technically these problems definitely apply to cheese and milk as well. But we're not going to go there. We are not going to go there. So anyway, into the topics. This is enough shenanigans, people. It's very, very... Oh, Davo Hunter, excellent to see you. I mean, yeah, I didn't know that there were white supremacist emojis, but yeah, my problem... I would assume having them would be the problem in the first place, rather than the banning of them. I don't know how that works, but anyway. Butter and popcorn, that's what you should all be getting and having with the show. Obviously, it feels too much. So an interesting one. I've talked on the show before about how immigration detention in Japan is an outer circle of hell, and you do not want to be in it. There is a thing, however, that there's this kind of problem that while you can be kind of strongly pressured into, like, if you are rejected entry or deported, they make you go and buy a ticket, and they basically escort you to the plane and make you get on, and you should do that if that happens. They can't, what they'll do with people who are caught on immigration offences or commit criminal offences while on a visa that causes their visa status to be revoked and deported, the Japanese government will hold people in immigration detention, particularly if they are appealing in order to stay. They may decide to let you live at home and wait out while your appeal is being heard, but they may just decide, and it's kind of arbitrary, to put you into these immigration detention prisons. They're more or less prisons, except unlike normal prisons, where you are still a citizen and subject to civil rights, immigration prisons, you are not even considered legally like a person in the country. And because of that, the conditions of the immigration prisons in Japan are terrible. They've been called out by Amnesty International multiple times for the number of mysterious deaths that occur to prisoners in those things, which is generally considered to be the result of the way that people that guards or whatever sort of react to and suppress violence by holding people down and whatnot. And all the other problems associated with it. And yeah, it's interesting. This is being featured in weekly magazines, and it's actually catching Japanese press, and I'm sure it's got something to do with that increasing attention. And of course, the condemnation from other governments and Amnesty International. The Ministry of Justice is going to be changing, the immigration agency is going to change the deportation law, basically to be more flexible, in terms of allowing people to wait out deportation hearings more often at home in certain circumstances, and to reward people that choose voluntarily to be deported, where at the moment, if you choose voluntarily, if you are deported, you cannot return to the country for 5 years. However, they are going to open a system where if people voluntarily leave the country, they can return after 12 months if they voluntarily leave. The real reason for this is that they do not force people. They don't actually, and I don't know how, I guess it's tricky how countries force people to be deported. For example, if you are from a country that you believe you are not safe, or that you don't want to go to, or you don't have the money to go there, there is the question about, can a country just put you on an airline and send you to that country against your will? I don't know how they do that in other countries, but in Japan, they basically don't do that, So because of that, people can stay in these long detention imprisonment scenarios for a long time, and there are lots of problems. So it's kind of good news, but honestly, it's kind of at the same time a superficial reaction to a to really deeper problems that the whole system really needs an overhaul. And really needs to be raised up to international standards. Question from TechArt 2. Good to see you, by the way. Yeah, what happens when people seek asylum in Japan? Excellent question. Japan gets something like, I forget the numbers now, but it's hundreds or thousands of asylum seekers, people who come to Japan and apply for asylum each year. Of those cases, only, like, the numbers were ridiculous. They were like less than 20 people were being accepted per year. Recently, they doubled the number to like 40. But these are, the Japanese basically, it's kind of funny, while Japanese hold up, for example, the wartime diplomat Sugihara, who issued transit visas for Jewish people fleeing Nazi Germany and so on, and how Japan, allowed this asylum, and they talk about what a great thing this person did, yet, and they also contribute a lot to UN agencies for human rights and for, UNHCR and whatnot. However, Japan really signs up to these treaties where the whole concept of asylum, that countries agree to be a safe haven for citizens of other countries whose lives are in danger due to persecution or something failing in those other countries. Japan signs up to that, yet it fails miserably in its obligations. There are people who come from Syria. There are people who come from countries whose cases in almost any other situation, would be acknowledged, and they turn down refugees from war zones, to be accepted. 20 out of thousands. It's got one of the lowest acceptance rates of asylum in the world. So that might make you ask, so why do people come to Japan? I actually did a video. I actually went to the there's the Japan something for refugees, Japan Association for Refugees. I did a video actually talking with the person there and actually asking exactly these questions. If you dig through my videos, you can find it, Japan Association Refugees, Hiko Simon. And yeah, she was sort of explaining that a lot of the people who come, who are rejected, are, for example, people coming from African countries, Democratic Republic of Congo, for example. Countries like this, where Japan doesn't recognize that, although there are civil war and there is, there are definitely problems in different parts of Africa, none of them meet the criteria that Japan recognizes for being valid to. I just noticed Steve from Berkeley's comment at the top there that if I sell a t-shirt with butter on it, you'll buy it. I'll put actual butter on the shirt. Coming back to it. yeah, Japan doesn't recognize those cases. So why do they come here? Apparently, a lot of the time, they don't choose to come to Japan. When they're fleeing for their lives and they get to the airport and they jump on a plane, often they're buying the first ticket to the first place that they can go to out of the country in the hope that they can, if they can be recognized as UN-registered refugees, that they can then settle either where they land, or they can then move on to another country with their refugee status. That they can go and settle in. Very few actually plan to come to Japan. Very few people who apparently come to Japan even realize that, know anything about Japan before they come here. However, so what happens is while the refugee application is being reviewed, which takes up to 3 years, they can work to sustain themselves, and some people do work during that time, and the government more or less tries to encourage people to figure out how to move on from the country and make it very clear that they're probably not going to get their applications approved and they will need to leave or move on. At the same time, though, it is to me breaching the conventions that they have to recognize refugees that meet certain criteria. In order to allow them to be registered as refugees and move on. The fact that Japan fails to register people who are clearly legitimate, they're clearly, while yes, there may be economic refugees within those numbers, and the government argues that something like 99% of them are economic refugees, the bar that they're applying is clearly a much higher bar than in most other countries. And, if they're not registering or recognizing legitimate refugees, that's a breach of their treaty obligations. So yeah, it's a problem. But generally what happens is they can stay for a few years, they can work, they can apply. Very few are successful. But yeah, most will try to move on. But this is a big problem. There's a lot of people in Japan, and a lot of the people who end up in immigration detention are people with rejected cases that don't move on. Particularly, I've noticed there's a Kurdish community. There are people from Turkey, for example, who do not feel safe moving back to Turkey for whatever reasons. And they refuse to leave. And there is a community here, but yet the Japanese government does not recognize that Kurds from Turkey, or I guess not just from Turkey, but I think they're mostly Turkish Kurds, are fleeing from a situation that constitutes something that they have to recognize as refugees. So, you have this situation with, that's one group. The other group are people from, for example, Central African Republic and Democratic Republic of Congo. And as I've said before, I'm a grandchild of a refugee. Before there was a proper system for this, I guess they just immigrated and worked. It was before these sort of systems were set up, but these sort of systems were set up to allow people like myself to, be born. So I think that Japan needs to do better anyway. I talked for way too long about that. I see that there are more comments. I think the next topic, what Aaron's talking about, we're about to get exactly to that. Before I do that, Andrea Mobwe, Australia sends them to prison on Christmas Island, or they send them to Papua New Guinea, Manus Island, right? Or Nauru. They send them to, basically, yeah. And again, it's unfortunate that in Australia the same sort of populism, doing the easy, sort of bullying things, is kind of what, again, how many Australians are there that had to come to Australia as refugees? I've got friends. I've friends who are lawyers, for example, who have done well and are contributing amazingly to Australia, who arrived in Australia on boats from Vietnam, whose parents, as babies, who, there are all sorts of people who have come to Australia in all sorts of refugee or refugee equivalent situations. And the fact that Australia is now basically putting them in concentration camps is nuts. So yeah, and they're doing it for votes. It's politicized. It's completely immoral. But yes, that's right. That is what Australia is doing. Yeah, Andrea Mobwe. Coming down. Oh, now I've lost the place in the comments. Let me. Here, found it again. Disgraceful, really. That's right. Aaron, any thoughts on how Suga and Biden will get along? Getting to that in a moment. They won't care where they go so long as they're safe. Yeah, Dan H., good to see you. Believe in yourself. Excellent to see you there in the comments. Good to have you here. And everyone else who's joining, sorry if I've missed anybody, but definitely say hello. Please, the butter emojis. When I see something's been suspended, it's extra distracting. But yeah, I won't. I'm not banning the butter emoji. So anyway, How will Suga get along with Biden? There's the question. Suga tweeted his congratulations, as did almost every other Democratic country leader, just recognized. The Republicans, by the way, as well, are being pretty quiet. They're certainly not sticking up for the voting conspiracies, partly because, I mean, it looks bad and they don't want this to blow back on them, given that it looks pretty much like it's done now. I mean, Trump really should be conceding at this point. I mean, of course, he'll never do that. I doubt he'll ever do that. I think he'll appeal all the way to the end. But, yeah. Oh, JMac217, excellent to see you. Before I dive into this, Dan H has a comment. If I'm not mistaken, there is a mix. Some of them are Iraqi and Iranian Kurds, not just Turkish Kurds. It's possible that the Kurds who are in Japan have been here, like, since I've been here, like, before there were the conflict. Of course, it's quite possible. Of course, there are Kurds from Syria. There are Kurds from large populations in Iraq and in Iran. In terms of the refugees who leave and come to Japan, I believe most of them are from Turkey. Of course, it's quite possible there are Iraqi Kurds as well and Syrian Kurds, particularly given the recent conflicts. But most of this community has been here as long or longer than I have. So yeah, and it would actually be, to me, even more nuts to not recognize the refugee status of people from Syria or Iraq from any group. But yeah, the part of what makes it difficult is that the Japanese government does not recognize a conflict situation in Turkey, which it's a tough situation, right? So anyway, so what's going to happen? Japan, well, let's talk about it from a Japan perspective. I've already given my superficial view on the overall situation. I mean, look, to me, quick comment. I've tried to resist talking about Trump as much as possible for the last few years. I think what's interesting, I mean, yes, my interpretation of why 71 million people still voted for Trump and why he won, and clearly won, the Electoral College last time. And people tell, who wins, who becomes the president? That is the chosen representative of America to the world. And people have said, well, a lot of Americans didn't vote for him, or he didn't win the popular vote, so you can't really say that. But this is the system that Americans chose for who represents them, and under that system, I mean, he won, and he won fairly and by a large margin, actually, in the Electoral College against Hillary Clinton. And my interpretation of why he won is basically, I think there's a global problem with politics, which is politics is always kind of two-faced by nature. In any country, I think what happens, there's a cycle that everyone kind of became a bit cynical about, but my take is, and this happens in not just America, but a lot of countries, is that when people are looking to get elected, they'll go to their base groups. So the Democrats will go to the United Auto Workers, and they'll go to the unions, and they'll say, we're going to protect, U.S. jobs, and we're going to stop, Japanese cars coming in, and we're going to smash up a Honda, and we're going to do all these cool things. And we're going to, protect American jobs over, bad free trade agreements. And then the Republicans will go to who they go to. And it used to be that they'd go to business groups. But then they figured out that it was actually much better to go to Tea Party, QAnon meetings. and they've got their base. And they'll say whatever their base wants to hear. And they'll appeal to that in the primaries to get elected. And then after that, they'd always flip into, okay, winning the election means now grabbing voters from the other side. So now appearing reasonable to the other side, you'd switch from appealing to your red meat base to the other side. And then when you get into government to work, you would actually then exercise your own judgment, and even if it contradicted, for example, your core voters. In fact, what was often happening, I think, was that people would consider that the core voters on either side were safe, and the competition was always for the middle. And this is where you started to get these presidents, and not just in America but elsewhere, of people who, for example, Democrats wanting to appeal to Republican sort of voters or middle of the road voters would compromise on healthcare, and they would be tough on crime so that they could contradict the image that they might be soft on crime. And they'd always appeal. So basically, it was all set up that the core voters were the least important, and they would always tell them what they want to hear, which would turn out to be lies, because then they'd ignore it. They'd say that they're going to protect the jobs, and then they'll set up, international trade systems that are offshore all of these jobs. And they would do that in a calculation, and they'd make the decisions that they make based on probably two things. What they should be based upon, and what leaders are supposed to do, is that when they're elected, their job is not to hand out candy to all of the people who voted for them. Their job is to be leaders. This is what you choose these people to make the difficult calls that we can't make, and to figure out what's in the overall better interest. And realize that sometimes just simply handing out candy or giving people exactly what they ask isn't actually what's in the greater interest. Sometimes, global free trade, sometimes defense alliances. These things are, some global multilateral agreements for climate change and so on. These things might require self-sacrifice. But if they're in the overall better interest, you elect people to be leaders and exercise judgment about what's in the overall better interest. However, of course, the other thing that drives this is not just good judgment. It's also that there's now moneyed politics and lobbyists and so on who pay money to both parties to get the same policies no matter who wins. And I think what was happening in America, where you've got a very simple, easy to corrupt two-party system, people started to realize that basically there wasn't very much difference. I mean, as much as they make noise about, push-button issues like guns or abortion or stuff like that, fundamentally, in terms of like bailing out banks, in terms of global free trade, lobbyists were paying for these policies on both parties, and people were feeling like that, and people started to notice that they were getting lied to by both parties in every election, and the parties seemed to be serving the lobbyists more than that, and they didn't seem to be exercising judgment that people could understand, mainly because neither party felt the need to explain these policies to people. So people were assuming that this was basically them being screwed over by both parties, who, and moneyed interests. And I think the reason that people voted for Trump was because they believed that he was going to be the bull in the china shop, that he already had money so he wouldn't be bought off, and he was promising to go and kick out all the moneyed interests and sort of reset this politics, which had sort of become just sort of level and corrupt and not really working for anyone but their own sort of self-interests, and ignoring all the voters and lying to them every round. And this, by the way, this was politics. This is what would happen. The Democrats would come in and say that they were going to be protectionist, and then there'd be free trade, and they'd say that they were going to correct flaws in the justice system, and then they'll go and put more minorities in jail, because they'd always be trying to appeal to the other side. And same with the Republicans. And it seems like the Republican Party took the bait soonest. They actually, instead of taking for granted the Tea Party and the sort of fringe base in their party, they actually started playing up to it. And Trump, I mean, for all of his flaws, deep flaws as a human being, and I don't like the guy, but I can understand that people probably voted for him because he actually did all the crazy stuff that everyone says they're going to do in the primaries, but you always know that they're lying. But he actually, when he said he was going to build a wall with Mexico, well, he tried to do it. He actually did all the crazy racist, horrible sort of stuff, and people weren't used to seeing that, and I'm sure that's why he got votes again. And this is why what's going to happen now is that we now that we're going back to normal, I mean, I don't think normal is necessarily a good thing. And I think that if people see what made them vote for Trump happen again under the Biden administration, I think we're going to get an even bigger blowback in 4 years from now with someone. I mean, it's hard to think now that anyone could be worse than Trump, but I do remember when we had Bush and people thought, wow, it's not going to get worse than this. I mean, even the Tea Party seems almost mainstream now. And I also fear that, it'll be, and then it'll be someone in the Democrats who'll figure out the same formula of the the Republicans figured out, which is rather than ignoring your base, run with them, screw everybody else, do the extreme stuff, and then you'll have broken politics. It'll just come to a stage that you won't be able to have elections anymore. And that's a situation that has happened in a lot of countries in that way. And I think it could happen, and not just in America, it could happen in a lot of countries. And so, to me, the solution on this is, and this is true with Japan, and it's true with a lot of the things that I care about, the problem is the arrogance and the hubris of politicians, that they feel like, I know best, trust me, you don't need to understand this, just know I'm doing the right thing for you. That kind of arrogance comes across, and people resent it. And rather than telling people that you're going to protect jobs and, not be protectionist and stuff like that, explain why free trade is good and why you're going to follow up with it. Climate change, explain, rather than, of course it's easy to say, hey, we're not going to sacrifice jobs for, a problem that's going to happen 50 years from now. that may or may not happen. I don't even believe it. Trust me, it doesn't exist. I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, and we're going to, screw the planet and kill human civilization. Don't do that. Explain why carbon taxes. Explain why, renewable energy and taking human climate change contributing emissions seriously is important. Take responsibility for selling the policies that you're actually planning to implement. And if you can't, don't do them. And if you can, explain them. But don't lie to people and treat them like they're too stupid to understand a reasonable explanation of it. Because that's what I think has pissed everybody off. Same with the Japan situation. This is where I am hopeful that with the Japan situation, it's always kind of funny, the situation that again, Democrats, if they're going for the core votes, but part of the reason that they've always had difficulty with the Democrats have always come across to Japan as being less Japan friendly is partly because the rhetoric that they go through. When the United Auto Workers Union is one of the main backers of the party, it means that during the primary stage, everybody takes turns, if not directly bashing Japan, which some do, sort of hinting that they're going to bash Japan, or they're going to sort of rebalance trade on automotive, cars with Japan or whatever. And even when they get elected, they're kind of nervous to look too friendly with Japan. They're worried about how it looks and it comes across. I mean, to me, it makes sense why they act that way. There aren't really any lobby within the traditional Republican Party. There isn't really any anti-Japanese, other than maybe war veterans for a certain period of time. But there isn't really any constituency in the Republicans that's anti-Japan. So you don't have that hostility or that awkwardness that. There's definitely awkwardness with the Democrats, plus the fact that Hillary actually, made a dog and pony show of humiliating Hatoyama to the point that she more or less forced him to resign over the Okinawa base issue. So, Japanese always look a little bit nervously at at Democrat wins. That said, Suga moved pretty quickly. America is Japan's most important trading partner and defense ally. And, Trump promised to squeeze allies for more money. Japan, by the way, pays like 90% of base costs, and they actually have the fourth largest, highest military spending in the world. So it's not like Japan isn't doing its bit. And the restrictions in its constitution against using forces overseas were imposed by the United States. So the idea that Japan, isn't doing its fair share, which again, Trump was shilling for votes by saying that Japan was somehow taking advantage, and telling Abe in the first meeting, I used to remember Pearl Harbor. So, I'm sure he left the impression that this guy is nuts, and they were overtly coming to shake down Japan. It was literally an extortionate attempt, sending, what's his face? I don't have to even remember his name anymore, but sending the defense minister over to basically shake Japan down for more base cash money, when those bases are there for U.S. interests. So I think the Japanese are happy that Biden won, just because the kind of mobster approach to using defense, basically, as I've said, for taking advantage of U.S. troops in Japan, rather than as for supporting an ally and projecting U.S. power and interests in the region, for using them simply as a hooker on a street corner to get money from, and to shake down Johns in Japan and Korea, which they did. They did it successfully with Korea. They got more cash out of them, but essentially turning it into like a protection racket, is just nobody is going to work with that. They talk about making America great. That's how America ends. And look, a lot of people in America is isolationist by nature, and I think America doesn't need so many bases overseas. It doesn't need to be in so many conflicts. And I think that, countries recognize, and Japan recognizes, it's got to, actually do more for its own defense, although it spends a lot on it. But, I think even the Japanese, who are not normally warm to the Democrats, will welcome Biden. That's why they've reacted so quickly, even though the call isn't final in the U.S. It's the reason that Japan was one of the first countries to call Biden, is I think they'll be relieved again that while it might not be, they're not dancing down the street. It's not like this is, they don't actually have the world shogi champion being president of the United States. I think just having anyone who is not mobster-like or criminal in their mindset and approach, and just nuts is an improvement. Having someone who actually knows how to talk to another world leader is actually a good thing. And that's what America's been for the last 4 years. And you saw how hard Abe tried to suck up. I mean, that was pretty embarrassing as well. And I'm pretty sure that Suga wouldn't want that. All of that said, while I don't know anything about Biden's views on Japan, I would say neutral is probably, it'd be slightly guarded again. The Democrat Party is just not traditionally friendly, and you have people like Hillary Clinton who came in and actually, punched holes in walls, it seems, in Japan, and was pretty much happy to come and, beat up a Japanese prime minister. So, and Obama, I like Obama, and I would have, I would have supported him if I was American. But from a living in Japan perspective, Obama always looked super uncomfortable around Abe. I think he read and believed a lot of the press that said that Abe was a right-wing nationalist extremist, which, well, maybe he is, but he did a good job of hiding it. And I thought that the press was overblown, but Obama looked like he was reacting to negative press, and I guess, again, he comes from Chicago, so he was being careful about, he was much warmer, and and Japanese noticed that he was being much friendlier with Premier Xi than with Abe. And, well, sure, Xi's got a bigger economy and everything, and America was much more tied up with that. In terms of who's America's friend, Japan clearly is America's friend, and, the fact that they seemed uncomfortable with that, whether that was for domestic reasons or because of the press tone about the Japanese leader, I don't know, but Biden was the vice president for that. I'm hoping that won't continue. I don't think he'll be like that. I think Biden understands that he's got kind of a free pass with global leaders now, who are all just relieved to have somebody who they can actually talk to as US president. So hopefully he's going to come in a reset mode, and he's going to kind of take the parade and be friends with everybody and restore things with allies, which are pretty broken at the moment with everybody. So that part of it will be a good thing. But we'll see. The truth is, I'm not optimistic about anything about Biden other than it's just going to be a return to normal, with the understanding that normal is what got us in this situation in the first place. So he's actually going to have to fix things. And there's a lot to fix from the old system. But in terms of what he actually represents for Japan, no one knows. Do I think he's going to, be FDR? Do I think he's going to have the Green New Deal and universal health care and do all these things that people expect him going to do? I saw a Twitter video of people dancing in that Capitol Hill area of Seattle celebrating the Biden win. I think those people are going to be the most thoroughly disappointed people, if things go back the way I think they will. So we'll have to wait and see. I am hoping that the US does join the TPP. I think that's a good deal for, everybody, including America that's in it. And it'll be great to offset the disengagement that's happening with China. Get suppliers in Vietnam and Indonesia, and that America relies on that are in China. I mean, America's learning in its disengagement from China that it can't do everything that it was getting from China, which is all the more reason build up close relationships with countries that are your friends and that want to trade with you, right? So I'm hoping that'll happen. I'm hoping that the fact that Biden's already said he's going to, I think I've got it in here somewhere, he's going to, on day one, he's going to rejoin the WHO. Hell yes. I mean, yes, the WHO actually has a lower degree of trust in Japan than it has in America. Like Korea and Japan, where Korea and Japan were being criticized by Tedros for the travel bans that they put on China in February, back before anyone else was doing it. And Tedros said, hey, let's not do anything crazy here. And even Japan was saying, oh, they've been paid off by China. But Japan didn't quit the WHO. I mean, my 11-year-old son was making fun of Tedros. Like, everyone at school said what a maniac he was. This was when, Trump was denying that, COVID-19 could even come to America. So, I'm not saying that the WHO is perfect, but it's necessary. I mean, it's not great, but the information that you get through it, the Kyoto Climate Accords, all of these things that he says he's going to rejoin, great. I mean, again, this is all just getting back to the baseline of normal, and then it's a question, what does he do from there? And we'll see. Like I said, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. Really, a lot of supporters of Biden are going to be really disappointed. I think expectations are too high, but at the moment, I think most people, including myself and including Prime Minister Suga, I think are feeling relief. And I think we'll probably bask in that relief for about 6 months to a year, and then we'll actually find out what we've got to deal with. And I've got no idea what we've got to deal with. I don't know anything about what Biden or Harris will be like for foreign policy, and we'll see. But I think it's I think that's where we're at. I've been ignoring the comments, so I will take a look now. Let's go back up. That was Dan H talking about Kurds. So I think after that, Quinn Rankid, just like Al Gore, fighting to the end. I hope Trump fights to the end. Well, yeah, but remember, just before the inauguration, Al Gore did give up in Florida. He could have appealed, and he decided not to appeal. And some people thought that he shouldn't have done it, but in the end of the day, he did the right thing. I don't think Trump will ever do the right thing. I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, I do remember that. I think Al Gore, yeah, in the end, by giving up, which he did in the end, although he kept it going for a long time, that was the right thing. Of course, in that case, it was all coming down to one state. Here there are multiple states. So we'll see. But, but yes, think about what happens next if the 70 million who voted for him aren't satisfied with the process. Well, this is the other thing. Like I say, the process, is pretty transparent in America. I mean, if America can't hold a legal vote, this isn't Guatemala. This isn't a country which has historic problems with manipulation of elections. We'll see. And frankly, just making up stuff without evidence, like appears to be happening. If there is evidence, I love to see it myself. But the idea that multiple states could be manipulated, again, Gore was just doing it on one state. The idea that Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania were all somehow fraudulent. The whole scenario of what happened does make sense. The president said, "Don't mail in vote," so all of his supporters didn't, and the Democrats said, "Mail in vote," and everyone did. And the Republican states said, "You can't count the mail-in votes till after the election day starts," which is why the counts came in late in those states. And it came out exactly as you'd predict. It all makes coherent sense. Now, of course, I am interested to see if those, if they find irregularities, and we will have to wait for that, no question. But I think it's done. The Red Value, good to see you. Silly request. Could I please say Yokohama, Osaka, Aomori, King Street, Tokyo, Nagoya, Kagoshima, Fukuoka? Hope that made your day. Aaron, props to you for sharing your open and honest perspective. Well, that's my perspective. I don't know. Yeah, Lucy. I'm not saying this to me, but someone who actually, I get it. I get that people are drawn to Trump actually saying what he believes and not just saying what he thinks the audience wants to hear or is politically correct. The result is that he says some crazy shit, but he follows it through as well, which is kind of good. It's also kind of bad. Again, this is why we don't have 10-year-olds as presidents, because you don't want them to act like the sort of in the way that the president's acted. But yeah, I will give him that. Honest is a funny way of putting it. He's been pretty much transparent. I don't think he's deceived anybody. I think he has represented exactly what he said he would stand for, which actually makes him completely different to most former presidents and politicians that say one thing when they're getting elected and do something totally different. The fact that he's just been consistent about the worst possible things, but he's been consistent. If people voted for him because they wanted Muslims out of America and they wanted someone who's going to make their lives miserable and make them afraid, yeah, congratulations, they got their guy. The fact that you would campaign on that and that you would then follow through on that, I find extremely disturbing. And the fact that 71 million people voted for that, I find disturbing. But yeah, props to him for being clear. And and that is something which I think, if the Democrats don't learn from that, not being not the being racist part, but on the actually being transparent part, if they don't follow through on that, it's going to happen again. Screw everybody else. Here goes 2020 indeed. Weird to realize Trump is the only US president that didn't start a war in the last 40 years. You know what? Give him credit for that. Give him credit for that. And for pulling the troops out of Afghanistan, and he got criticized for doing that in a haphazard, high-handed way. Yeah, that should have happened ages ago. We thought Obama was going to do that. Now again, Obama left them in, and I don't think he was entirely transparent about why. He sort of said it wasn't the right time, and had to come out in a sort of a coherent way. But I actually, look, Trump is a classic isolationist president, and I think America is entitled to be isolationist. I wish it wasn't. I wouldn't choose for it to be, but I think a lot of Americans don't want America to be fighting everyone's wars. And yeah, credit to him for that. I think, and I think you've got to actually credit when he does something good. He did a couple of good things, and I think that not starting a war, first president that didn't start a war in 40 years, I mean, that's good. That's actually a rare thing, to have a president who doesn't get a lot of Americans killed, starting, wars. The Dems are bifurcated, says Quint Rankid, and I think it's the reverse about Trump being racist. I've listened to what Biden says, and he sounds more racist to me. That's interesting. Look, I'm sitting here, I watch the debates, I listen to what they say. I don't think I've noticed anything. I mean, unless you talk about reverse racism, if you interpret like affirmative action as reverse racism, then perhaps what Biden has said could be interpreted that way. But I haven't noticed anything Biden says particularly. I don't think he's Gandhi. I really have a very neutral opinion, I think, about him as a person. I don't think he's good or bad, and I'm just going to sit back and see what he does now. I've tried not to pay attention to the electoral campaign. Yeah, well, look, and to me, Trump just is like having a racist relative who just should know better about when to be quiet. But not only is not quiet, but actually follows through. That's the problem. Odie Jr., boom, good to see you there. Catching up, the red value. The automatic subtitles were able to reproduce those places perfectly. Oh, the auto subtitles, the quality has become amazing. Of course, I'm being careful to speak as well, but and the mic probably helps, but I noticed that the quality of the auto captioning has actually improved dramatically. Sadiq saying, what will happen to the Turkish presidency now? That's a whole, well, but you know what? I think that America was kind of on a path to becoming a bit like the Turkish presidency. It's kind of funny. I never actually saw any. While Erdogan strikes me as a kind of leader that Trump sort of got along with, I don't know if America actually had better relations with him or not, or if Trump even registered very much about Turkey or Erdogan. But yeah. I mean, again, I don't know what your position is on that, and I know nothing about it, so I'm not going to say anything, to upset people either way about Turkey. But that's a very interesting situation that's been happening over there as well, and I think consistent, but in a perhaps more advanced way with what's been happening in a lot of other countries. It's not just a Turkey thing. Quint Rankid, Biden said that if you don't vote for him, you aren't black. Oh yeah, well that's yeah, I thought that. Well, so this is, you know what, I mean, maybe that's racist. It's kind of racist-y. Yeah, it's kind of bad, but I think it's actually worse than racist. This is what the Democrats do. They take people for granted. They take their voters for granted, and they believe that they're entitled to these votes. And that's what killed them before. That's why Hillary lost. And that's where, if Biden goes back to that, if that becomes the tone of his presidency, Trump is going to be a trip to Disneyland compared to the next person that comes back when people, swing back the other way again. So, couldn't rank it. I remember that, and that is exactly the sort of thing that terrifies me about Biden and about the Democratic Party, and that is the worst way that they can screw things up, is that kind of attitude. But that's the attitude that they've had for a long time. So yeah, we'll have to see. Dan H, thank you for pointing out that I missed your message. Let me go back and find it. Dan H, the CSIS think tank as good for and against Biden piece. In terms of its relationship with Japan, Joe Biden would be good in Japan. It's written by 2 professors in Japan. Thank you for that. I'll look that up. I think just to the extent that the Democrats before, this is what drove me crazy about Clinton. Obama and Clinton, as the Secretary of State, negotiated and set up the TPP, and it took years of negotiations, and it was good for America, and it was good for Japan, and they wanted this. And then when Clinton went into electioneering mode, and she was standing in front of the unions and auto workers, she said, you know what, I'm actually not a fan of this treaty which I negotiated. She didn't want to defend it or explain it. She wanted to, and everyone knew that she was lying. Everyone knew that she was lying and shilling for votes when she said that. But here's the thing, the Democrat, the institutional Democrat Party, And I don't believe they were doing it for lobbied interests. I think they were doing it because it was the right thing for America, but they didn't have the courage, they didn't have the fortitude to actually explain why the TPP. It was too hard to explain why it was good, and it was too easy to say, oh, that thing, I don't have anything to do with that. And this is the point. I think a lot of people who saw Hillary disowning the TPP when she created it, or, in terms of the version that the US was going to sign, saw her as being dishonest and untrustworthy either way. But that said, it is good for Japan, it is good for America, and assuming that Biden represents the Institutional Democrat Party, I don't know what that think tank was talking about exactly, but the idea that resuming normal alliance relationships and normal trade relationships, that would be good, and that's what I'm hoping. And I don't think, this is the whole point as well, while Democrats engage sometimes in anti-Japanese rhetoric, they don't really follow through with it. Again, this is why people see them as dodgy, but it's kind of why I don't think, I agree, they're not, while there's general awkwardness with Japan, I don't think there's anything actually that bad. And right now, going back to awkward good is still better than what we have from a Japan perspective. But thank you for that. I will read that assessment by CSIS, and thank you for flagging that I missed it. And please, anybody else, if I miss your comments, please just do what Dan H did, because I don't miss it on purpose. You can see you were watching me scroll, and I'm trying to do it quickly. Odie Jr., the US has 2 bases in Turkey, so they may be saber rattling, but will probably not do anything. I don't know. The saber rattling part, is this to do with US intervening in the Greece thing, or is this to do with the Syria stuff, or the Russia stuff? Remember, 2 bases in Turkey. Turkey is in NATO. Turkey is an ally of the US. I know it's been kind of awkward recently, but Turkey is actually a really important ally of America. And of course, yes, it is lately getting friendly with Russia, which is funny because a couple of years ago, Russia and Turkey were actually having terrible relations. It's remarkable how they turned that around. But Odie Jr., I'm sorry, I don't know the context of that comment anyway. Quint Rankin, maybe that's why, according to what I've heard, Trump did much better with minorities. When you say he did better with minorities, did he do better than before, or better than Biden with minorities? I doubt. Well, we'll see. Who knows? Trump got 71 million votes. That's a hell of a lot of votes. It was an extraordinary turnout this time. A lot of people were motivated on both sides to vote. I do think that, the biggest danger, if I were advising the Democrats, I would be telling them, don't act entitled. Don't act like you expect these. Don't take these votes for granted. That's why they left you. So, By the way, Paragotti, apart from the fact that's a great handle name, I also don't recognize it. So, that is good to see you in the comments. And indeed, like I say, I agree. The DNC, I think, are their own worst enemy, as is the case with most political parties. I was kind of joking. All they had to do was just be quiet. They could have won by default, which is, I fear, maybe they did win by default. And, while we're all happy at default, we don't know what it is. We're going to find out. So we'll see. But anyway, that's the first news story, and we have 2 minutes left on the show. Lucy, I've tried to... Good point. Well, once every 4 years I'll talk about America, although I've been trying desperately to keep it tied to Japan. And I think improved trade and improved defense are things that are likely to happen just because they've both been run into the ground under the current administration. I think those are things that are good for both countries. So we'll see. Hankos. The Hanko Association is inflamed with Kono Taro's tweets mockingly talking about how they're going to get rid of Hankos for everything. And they've charged into the LDP offices saying that you're rubbing salt into the wounds. This is an assault on Japanese culture. Stop it. And stop it. Indeed, stop it, because you're making me like Taro Kono even more. I made a beat. I found a new way to record. I basically screen captured from my iPad and recorded a video of me making a track in real time. I put it on the Tokyo Digital Crew channel. It's pretty good. I just made a little 1 minute loop. Of course, like all my stuff on SoundCloud, you can download it, and I build it up so you can take the section that you like and loop it and use it as background music on your videos or whatever you like. And it was just kind of fun. I actually found a nice way to share how I make them. I got a little keyboard out and GarageBand on iOS. It's free. You can do that. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Check that out. We've got Toshiba, the renewable energy stuff. I mean, all the technology stuff right now is so cool. The space stuff, the renewable energy stuff. Toshiba, apparently this is not new, like in Europe and elsewhere. It is new in Japan. That Toshiba, which makes nuclear power plants, in addition to many other things, is taking those sort of expertise, and they're actually creating virtual power plants against Japan. The idea being that they're going to take a whole lot of renewable energy like wind farms and solar farms and so on, and they're actually going to connect them all as like one virtual power station. And if you want to purchase renewable electricity, you can actually like take your little chunk like from this. It's basically like a renewable energy cloud, in the same way like cloud computing, where you have one big supercomputer and you're taking that little bit of that supercomputer that you want to use. They're doing that with power for renewable energy. The idea of being, and they're going to use a sort of micro generation and small local grid generation into a virtualized single large power station to sort of increase the capacity of Japan to generate renewable energy. This is awesome. This is what Japan should be like investing in like crazy. However, part of the problem with that is that, well, it's not really a problem, but the rest of the world is so far ahead. I've got so many stories here. Crap. Overseas companies, are so far ahead of Japan on this. I saw a thing that Europe has something like 40 or 400 times more renewable energy installed. Oh, I'm not going to log in now, but it was they have a lot more renewable energy. China has far more experience and far more production on photovoltaics, and Europe has far more on wind. And the result of that is that while Japan is now pushing on renewable energy once again, and good on them for doing that, and Toshiba setting up this infrastructure which Japan desperately needs to allow that. It's a huge business opportunity for people outside of Japan and companies from outside of Japan to come in and get rich. And for Japanese companies, they need to retool, but they should be doing that because this is where our energy is and should be coming from. And it's really great to see Toshiba innovating like this on doing cloud type power generation. Super interesting to see that SpaceX's satellite-based internet is actually already working well enough that it's faster than most internet in the US, and you can access this anywhere in the world. I find this so exciting. I mean, I know that the prices are reasonable. You could afford them. I think there's something like $100 a month. I would love if they actually do something to make this accessible in third world countries. I mean, again, I still think the idea of unlocking the human potential of all the brains in places like Africa, places that don't have regular connection to utilities or infrastructure. The idea that you could basically have coding and have people coming up with web services and so on in places beyond the few rich countries that exist in the world right now, and integrate those economically. I think the potential for like advancing human development is just awesome, and I just love the fact that it's not just SpaceX, but they're the furthest ahead, but there are multiple companies setting up these satellite-based internet systems, and this is how we're going to watch internet and use internet on the moon, in space stations around the Earth, and probably Mars as well. I think it's so cool what's happening right now. I didn't know about this. There are 3 colors of hydrogen. There's gray hydrogen, which is apparently what the Australians are trying to sell Japan at the moment, which is where you can actually extract. Apparently you can just get gasoline or coal, or you can get old-fashioned there's a description of it here. You get old-fashioned sort of hydrocarbons, and you can extract the hydrogen part. You, as a result, emit carbon dioxide through that process as you sort of extract the hydrogen, which makes it grey hydrogen as polluting as just using coal normally. And thus provides no environmental benefit whatsoever, other than that the hydrogen itself can be transported and burned somewhere else without causing emissions, just water. But the creation process is as dirty as using fossil fuels. Then you've got blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen captured the same way, but that uses a whole lot of sequestration techniques to be able to extract and hold all of the carbon emissions, so that you don't have the carbon emissions that are being associated even though you are extracting hydrogen from dirty sources like coal and whatnot. So a slightly, it's a better option, and this is where, for example, if you want to extract hydrogen from liquid gas or coal or whatever, you can do it that way. And there's green hydrogen, which is much more expensive to do, but that's when you actually use renewable energy to use electrolysis to extract hydrogen from water or from seawater or whatever. Far more appealing because it doesn't involve any carbon emissions at all at any stage. There's no need for sequestration, but of course much more expensive to do, particularly at scale. I didn't know about this, but yeah, so when Japan is looking to buy a lot of hydrogen, the assumption is the stuff from Australia and from Brunei is at best blue, at worst it's grey, and it's worth understanding these distinctions. I think hydrogen is, just because it's transportable, it solves a lot of problems that batteries alone don't solve, and the Japanese government and a lot of countries have realized, okay, this is a good transitional way of doing this, of switching the economy to a sort of carbon-free economy. And it's good to watch, but it's also really important to understand those distinctions. So I thought that was interesting. A friend wrote a book. A mate of mine actually wrote 5 of these sort of science fiction books that are available on Amazon. I've actually got a copy over here. One of the authors of the book, Andrew Savage, lives in Tokyo. Excellent dude, wrote the book. Looking forward to reading it, and I'll share my impressions. But I love it when someone in Japan does something like this. Super cool, and I'm looking forward to checking that out. It's on Amazon. You can get it, I think, for free actually on e-readers. So check it out. Splice, 0 Point Awakening, Episode 1. He's already written 5 books apparently, and they're all going to be released over the next few months. Russia, apparently hydrogen exports you in Russia, but they are taking all of that gas that they're selling to everyone, and they're figuring out how to hopefully make it blue hydrogen and not grey hydrogen, but they're figuring out how to ship hydrogen around. And again, that's a good opportunity for Japan. Funny, you'd think with everyone locked up at home that there would be more babies. Not happening in Japan. What can I say? It's actually decreasing the birth rate. Now, of course, there's 2 possibilities there. People are either being careful, but this is Japan, so you know that that's not happening. They're actually just not doing the things that are required to generate births. And that seems to be the case. So that is interesting. I don't know what it's like in other countries. I suppose, I mean, it's obviously the idea of giving birth in a pandemic and all of that you'd be careful about not getting sick as it is, and all of that getting worse, I suppose. An awesome thing that I found on YouTube, Sassy Justice with Fred Sassy, taking the blindfold off of justice. This is a Cheyenne local news consumer watchdog show. It's actually made by Trey Parker and Matt Stone. It's remarkable. It's a 20-minute sort of consumer protection show. The first episode is on deep fakes. And Fred Sassy and Sassy Justice, I've watched this like 2 or 3 times, and it's remarkable. The warnings about deep fakes and what they can do. They do an interview with Al Gore. They interview Ivanka Trump. They interview a number of people. And they show the dangers of the technology. This is so well done. This is... you first watch, I was like, it took me about 5 minutes of what the hell is this? And then when they started interviewing Al Gore, it was like, wow. And it was actually only when they interviewed Al Gore that I realized the other stuff. And then I was like, whoa, it's worth watching. Everyone should watch this. It's actually astoundingly well done. Sasuga, South Park guys. In terms of what's happening in Tokyo, that orange line is the 7-day average. So we always have these dips on the weekends, and then they catch up after the weekend. You get these funny spikes, and it goes like this. But if you take the 7-day average, then you don't have that lump. So far in Tokyo, things are bad, although we haven't really gone over that sort of, we've had days where we get up to nearly 300, but the average, as you can see there, is still hovering around 190 cases per day, which, in a city of 14 million people as the world goes. I mean, Australia, congratulations on getting to 0 cases, and particularly in Victoria, I know that you guys did it really hard. But yeah, Japan isn't doing bad, but of course we are going into flu season, and we are going into winter where it's expected to get worse. It's going crazy right now in Europe. I mean, it's not just like America is struggling with this, the idea that it's due to the leadership style of America. Clearly, I mean, France and Britain and Italy are doing it differently, and they're getting the same terrible results over there, so it's a scary thing. In Tokyo, again, lucky, touch wood, but definitely not out of the woods. But if you're interested in how we're doing in Tokyo, that's how we're doing. It's bad, but it kind of has been the same. We're kind of, we had the first wave, and then it went down, and then we had the second wave, and it didn't go all the way back down. It just sort of stayed around here, which is higher than the first wave, but it isn't going up. It'll go up into the third wave next, but when arguably it's starting, but as you can see, it's still kind of flat, which is, I guess, a good thing. Chinese Coast Guard. The Chinese Coast Guard was recently incorporated into the Chinese military, and now they're passing a law which will allow the ships to fire at foreign ships. And these are the ships that are now every day patrolling around the Senkaku Islands, which are Japanese. Again, why Japan doesn't do what Korea did, and what Shintaro Ishihara wanted to do, which is just build fortifications on the islands so that no one can take them. This is what Korea did with Takeshima, or Dokdo, which we have to call it Dokdo now because it's fortified, Japan's never going to take it back. Japan's deliberately not built on these islands, and they've kind of tried to not do anything to provoke China, but China's just encroaching and encroaching and encroaching. They've got these enormous warships which they've converted into Coast Guard vessels. They've put guns on them. They've incorporated them into the military. Now they're going to let them shoot. Japan has recently acquired drones, which they're now flying over the islands because they can't keep up with the number of boats and the number of patrols. But frankly, it's now getting into a situation that China's patrolling these islands more than Japan is capable of doing. And, they're in a position that they can start to argue they've got de facto control, and that's what the goal is. So that is the thing that is happening. Kind of crazy that this hasn't happened already, but yes, the Financial Services Agency is actually setting up. They are trying to draw away or attract business from Hong Kong to move to Japan. There's obviously a lot of problems with that when they don't even have a team that speaks English, but they're setting one up. We'll see how that goes. Again, I mocked when they wanted to do this with tourism, and it went pretty well, but we'll see. H5N8, so not H1N1, not the original bird flu, but a different, still deadly bird flu strain has been detected in chickens, in Kagawa, and so as a result, they've had to cull 330,000 chickens. Points out as well as we're seeing in mink in Denmark right now as well. The whole thing's about factory farming animals for agriculture and the sort of health risks associated with that. It kind of shows that as well. Japan not messing around with that, which is a good thing. Of course, the thing about birds is that they fly, and presumably this was brought into the farm from an external bird that could be flying around in other places, and these are deadly for humans, and they come every few years. So, again, this is why you need to be in the WHO. You need to get the information on these things when they move around, and get the information on the latest on how to fight them. Obviously we're learning, but the last thing that we want is a bird flu outbreak at the same time. I didn't include it in the stories tonight, but there was a case in China apparently this week where apparently a lab for developing vaccines for contagious animal diseases. Apparently there was like a biosecurity breach, and apparently 6,000 people in the town beside this lab contracted this sort of contagious disease from the lab. Now the town's being isolated. I guess China's shown that they know how to isolate stuff. But yes, everyone in Japan was kind of going, oh my God, not again. So that's the thing that happened. This was a horrible case in Chiba, in a public school, not a private school. A girl was found to have like a red tinted highlights in her hair, and the teacher decided it was appropriate to put a garbage bag over her head and tie it around and get a black spray paint can and spray her hair black, which has caused her trauma, and her family have called a lawyer. The reaction of the internet is predictably and accurately, why are they calling a lawyer and claiming violation of human rights? It's assault. They should be arrested for that. Like, there shouldn't be any question. Somebody pointing out, well, again, everyone's pretty angry, and it's pretty outrageous. Especially the fact when you consider nowadays that there are so many kids now, increasing kids, including my own, who naturally do not have black hair. This sort of thing used to happen to kids with naturally brown hair. This was a case where it seems like the girl had actually tinted her hair, which was probably a breach of school rules, but still to react to that by actually putting a garbage bag over her head and spray painting it black is pretty awful. So there you go. There's the dominant foreign companies dominating. Sega's in trouble. They're shutting down their Sega video game parlors, which one of the things that drew me to Japan. I used to love playing video games in arcade parlors whenever I came to Japan, and the big one in Akihabara has been closed down. And now they've asked people to take voluntary redundancy, which in Japan it's impossible to fire people, particularly if they're permanent employees. But Sega's in trouble, which is sad to see. It was a great company. I joked that this made it official when it launched. The Tsunami Burger in Yokosuka, beside the US base, actually apparently offers a Trump burger as well, and the idea was that they'd have a competition. To tell the truth, the Biden burger just doesn't look very good. Apparently that is made of Philadelphia cheese and potato chips, but it looks like crisps potato chips rather than like French fries chips, which we call them in New Zealand and Australia. It looks like, is that coleslaw? I can't even tell. I mean, I guess I'd try it. But apparently the Trump burger has like jalapenos in it. It's spicy. I'm thinking of Fred Sassy again, but the Trump burger actually sounds. The Trump burger comes with a bacon, an egg, and a jalapeno chili pepper. That sounds like actually quite a good burger. I'm not sure that the Biden burger is so appealing. In fact, I'm not even sure what it is, but that kind of reflects the situation as well. I did joke that when they released this burger, that kind of made the results official. And Biden will rejoin the WHO. Yes. He'll rejoin the climate accord. Yes. He'll reinstate net neutrality. I mean, how in the hell did America give up net neutrality? Ajit Pai, are you kidding me? So again, just resetting to normal stuff. End of the show. Boom. I'm 15 minutes over. I recorded a track just before I started this, so it'll take some time to edit. It'll probably go up tomorrow, but it'll be like that one before. It was kind of cool. The Armed Forces of Organized Crime. How do you eat that thing? I imagine that you squash it and you stretch your mouth. I would eat that. Paragoti, I think that's what I was talking about. The 17 million mink in Denmark. Yes, a lot of coats from that. Apparently they developed a scarier strain of coronavirus, and I think the Denmark people understandably said, no thank you. Sergeant Buko, thank you for recognizing that the new screen cap setup is better. Indeed, I just got it straight off the iPad rather than trying to focus the camera above. It was a good system. You can see what my hands are doing, and you can see the screen. There were some things I needed to do to get it to work. It was not as straightforward as it looks. The iPad video doesn't sync. It's like the keyframes are all out of whack, and you actually have to fix the video before you can use it. But once I got it going, it's pretty cool. Quint Rankit, how much Hunko use is law and how much is tradition? Well, it's both. For certain types of contracts, I believe like real estate contracts, I think you have to use Hunko still. Hunko is considered like in the scale of evidence. Like you can have a verbal agreement, you can have a written agreement that's not signed, you can have an email agreement. And as you go up the scales of how good a proof that you've got a contract is, having a Hunko has always been considered like the highest form of proof, which is ironic because anyone can pick up the Hunko and stamp it. There's always the assumption, and in fact, actually, in most companies, it's never the president. Whereas in America, when you have someone sign a contract, of course, it'll always be the president's signature, and the president will have to spend an hour a day signing contracts. And so based on the signature, that company president at least has seen the contract because they had to see it when they signed it, so they can't disavow knowledge of it. The Japanese Hunko process in most companies is there is a Hunko team of office ladies who, if the contracts are approved by the legal department or whatever, and they'll go straight to the Hunko ladies, and the president won't see those contracts. They'll just get stamped by the Hunko ladies who are authorized within the company, the mechanism within the company. And that's considered legally good evidence that the company assented to the contract. But it's actually considered better evidence than a signature, which is like, at least with a signature, you know that someone was actually signing it. So, yeah, it's a funny thing, but there again, there isn't a law which requires Hunko. There is a case law precedent which says that it's the best form, which means that for particular agreements, it's considered the safest way to execute, and that's being modified. That's partly what Connor's attacking. He's saying that you can use electronic signatures. And they're just as good, and they're going to actually make this clear in law that they're just as good. Although apparently they are going to leave some exceptions where some contracts will still be done by Hunko. I don't think it's going to be 100% gotten rid of, but it isn't necessary in most cases, and it's kind of silly that it's overkill for a lot of, particularly conservative companies like banks that require it. So yeah, it's a good thing, but that's of course based on tradition, and there's an economy around it, and there is convenience around it, but it's not actually legally required in most cases. And I think that's all the comments that are aimed at me. So I think in the US we can use electronic signatures now. You can use them in Japan. You can use them. I use them all the time in my work. Definitely in the US you can use them, and they're a lot easier and a lot better. But well look, Ben Grant, good to see you. Hiko looks like a Trump supporter. Is it this? Because of this? Who knows? Yes, I'm a middle-aged white man. For a start, I'm not American. That's your first problem. I'm wearing an All Blacks jersey. So, wrong country. then there's like a million other problems which we can do on another channel and another show. But yeah, I've not seen YOLO live, but thank you for the suggestion. Pretty useful gadget. I don't know what that is, a YOLO live. I'll check that out. Yeah, long show tonight, but interesting times. We'll wait and see what happens. Lots of emojis. There's a Biden burger. Bushido Devil Dog. I'm not sure about all of that. So yeah. Anyway, that's the Biden burger. It's official. Congrats, America. We'll find out. We'll find out what's in the burger, right? We don't know. Interesting times. Remember, next week you can always follow me on Twitter. I share all the stuff during the week. You can talk with me about anything, and I'll be back here next Sunday night, as I always am, 10:30 p.m. to hang out, tell you what's going on in Japan, and to not talk about America. I'm just going to talk about it this week because, frankly, I think the election's done. Maybe after all the court cases, or when we get to the inauguration, maybe I'll mention it one more time. But yeah, good on you, America. And the warnings about general, by the way, when I was talking about the idea of what politicians need to do to get trust back and to stop disillusionment, that's in Japan too, that's in New Zealand too, that's everywhere. That's a problem, and it's resulting in the same things, and I worry about that. Congratulations on so many Americans for turning out and for having a system that still, appears to function. But we'll see if that lasts. So have a good night, everybody. Have a good week. Stay safe. Remember, don't get the Rona. It's getting worse right now. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, wear a mask. And have a good one. Boom. Peace. Awkwardly clicks to end the stream. Yes, I am sure.